What's up everyone? We have now hit 300 subscribers on this channel, and so I figured to celebrate, one thing I should do is go back and explain my rating system for those of you who are new around here, since I haven't talked about this in 10 years and I figured most of you who are here now were not also reading me back in 2012. So when I do my anime reviews, at the very end I usually say something like single plus, double plus, single tilde. What does this all mean? Well, the TLDR version is I have 3 degrees of good and 3 degrees of bad. Pluses are good, tildes are bad, more pluses is better, more tildes is worse. And that is basically all you need to know. But in this video, I'm going to go into it in a little more depth just so we can get into the nuance of how I actually grade things. So why did I come up with the system in the first place? Well, first, let's take a look at the pluses and the minuses, or the pluses and the tildes. I use tildes because in many word processors or browsers or other programs, if you have 2 hyphens in a row or 3 hyphens in a row, it'll automatically convert that into one longer dash, and that kind of defeats the purpose. You need to see exactly how many minus signs there are. So I decided to use tildes instead. You can see each of those individually. There's no automatic conversion. And also the waviness of the tilde kind of gives you a sense of mediocrity or eh. So I think that fit the role pretty well. Pluses, of course, pluses have a very positive connotation. I have been accused of ripping off George Orwell, and I had no idea at the time. When I first came up with the system, I had never read 1984. A few years later, I listened to the audiobook, I hear this double plus good part, and I think, this actually makes a lot of sense. I can see why people would accuse me of ripping him off. But I hope I've explained that pluses are very easy to work with. They obviously have a positive connotation. More pluses is better. So I'm not saying I'm not as smart as George Orwell. I'm just saying I didn't have to be to come up with this. Okay, on my anime list, by the way, I use $signs instead of pluses because when I tried to put in pluses into the input box, it didn't accept them. So I use $signs instead. In either case, more $signs is a good thing. You can just think of those as interchangeable with the plus. Okay, why didn't I come up with other rating systems, or why didn't I use existing rating systems? What are my problems with everything that's already out there that people already have some sort of intuitive understanding for? Well, let's start out with letter grades. If I have something like A, B, C, D, or F, that's kind of been tainted by the school system. It's kind of like you're starting with a point of perfection and then taking off points for all the flaws. I don't like that. I think that the proper starting point should be neutrality, and from there you can give points for what's good, you can take off points from what's bad. But I don't like starting at the top and simply taking off points. And that's kind of how people see A, B, C, D, F because of the school system. It's kind of the same thing with 0 to 100. You're starting off with 100 perfect points and you're taking points off for everything that's bad about it. So I don't want to use that. On top of that, when you have 100 different grades, what's the point of having like a 32 versus a 33? No one has any intuitive sense for the difference between them. Nobody probably even cares. Even if you cut that down to 1 to 10, you're just dividing that grade by 10. If you're going from 1 to 100 to 1 to 10, that's still too many grades on the lower end of the spectrum. When people grade from 1 to 10, they're usually using 7s, 8s, 9s, and 10s, and occasionally 6s. Maybe they'll experiment with the lower end of the scale for something that's really bad. But once again, what's the difference between a 3 and a 4, a 4 and a 5, a 5 and a 6, a 2 and a 3? Nobody really knows. There are too many unnecessary grades in there, and that skews everything upwards. So I wanted to do away with that extra fat at the bottom. So some people use a 1 to 5 rating system, some people use a 0 to 4 star rating system. I think that's a more appropriate amount of grades, about 5 total grades. But where is the cutoff between good and bad, between a recommendation and a non-recommendation? That's the one thing that system lacks. And that's just something that the thumbs up, thumbs down system actually does right. You can clearly tell whether something is a recommendation or not. Of course, the problem with that is that you only have 1 degree of good and 1 degree of bad, so you end up giving your favorite anime ever the same grade as something that was just barely good enough to watch. So what I did is I wanted to take that inherent dividing line of the thumbs up, thumbs down system, and then just throw 3 degrees on top of that for good stuff and 3 degrees below that for bad stuff. Now, in practice, here's how my breakdown works out. And these are the stats from back in 2012. I haven't gone and recrunched the numbers. I'm too lazy to do that, but I don't think it's changed all that much. I think the sample size from back then was perfectly large. So Triple plus, all the way at the top, I had 4.4%. Double plus, I gave to a fairly large number, 29.3%, so about 30% there. Half of my anime got single pluses. Then things on the lower end of the spectrum, you don't see that very often. Single tilde got 13%, double tilde got 2%, and triple tilde got only 0.7%. So as you can see here, most of the anime I watch ends up getting a plus or higher, and this is because I tend to like most of what I watch, believe it or not. Even though I'm so critical, I still enjoy watching most anime. And actually, since 2012, things have probably skewed even more positive because I've gotten better at curating what I watch, and I'm less under the influence of other anime bloggers who tend to like anime that I don't and tend to force me to watch anime that I'm probably not going to like, but I watch against my better judgment. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to get into each grade and tell you how I tend to get there, to some different ways that I can arrive at these different grade levels, and also give you some examples of what anime do fit under those grades. And I'm going to try to make these anime that are more recent, since in 2012 I provided some examples from all the anime I've watched up until then. Here I'll try to give you some examples from anime I've seen in the past 5 years, although that's not always possible, especially for some of the lower grades. Okay. Single plus. You might be tempted to think of this as kind of a default grade because I've given it to so many anime, about half of the anime I've watched, and also it seems like it shouldn't be too hard to get there. All you have to do is kind of be mildly entertaining. But like I said, it's really not a default grade. I start from a completely neutral standpoint and give things points for what they do right, take off points for what they do wrong. And the question I posed back in the day was, would I recommend this show to myself if I haven't seen this? Imagine if I hopped into a time machine after watching the anime, went back to my previous self, and told myself, this is worth watching, or don't bother watching this at all. That's kind of the dividing line between plus and minus, between good and bad, between recommendation and non-recommendation. So how could I end up in this grade level? I'd say the most common way to get here is just to be consistently mildly entertaining. Something that's never too good, never too bad, just kind of right. Another way to get here is to have kind of a lot of high highs, but also a lot of low lows, so things just kind of average out in the middle. And the third way to get here is to be kind of artistically impressive. Even though I might find the show kind of boring or even annoying, I still think that the artistic merit of the show makes it worthwhile. How heavy are the dumbbells you lift? Or Danberu nan kilo motteru? This is an anime that I would classify as being consistently mildly entertaining. It's never that good, it's never that bad. It's just yet another anime about high school girls picking up a hobby. What's the hobby this time? Lifting weights. Do they tell each other a lot of shitty jokes? You bet they do. And they learn about the power of friendship on top of that. So, it's something that's kind of fun, but it's never gonna blow you away. My example of an anime with a lot of high highs and low lows would be the most recent Higurashi adaptation, Higurashi Go and Higurashi Sotsu. Here's an anime with certainly a lot of killer moments, but also a lot of long stretches of the show being really boring and or really stupid. So I was just kind of content to slap the single plus label on it and kind of forget about it. A lot of the fillerized shonen anime like Naruto and Bleach end up with a single plus in the same way. They certainly have a lot of great moments in them, but then they have all that filler dragging them down. So I'm just content to average them out at single plus. Finally, we have the artistic route to the single plus, something like Cowboy Bebop, which I found to be pretty boring, but it does have a lot of great music, it has a lot of style to it. If I got in that time machine, I would not tell myself not to rewatch it. Something like the Tatami Galaxy, which has a lot of artistic merit, a lot of literary merit, but at the same time, a lot of the characters are really annoying, but I would still watch it again. Now let's talk about how to get to double plus. I would say the most common way to get here is just to have a stretch of really excellent episodes. Another way to get here is just to be really all around solid and not to have any serious flaws. And the final way to get here is just to be kind of my own subjective guilty pleasure. An example of an anime that got to double plus by having a stretch of really good episodes would be Tokyo Revengers. That first arc was tremendous, even though after that it kind of falls off, but is still pretty good. An example of something that has the opposite pattern would be Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba, which starts off kind of slow, but the longer it goes on, the better and better it gets. Then we have shows like Licorice Recoil or Mushoku Tensei that don't hit the same highs as the early episodes of Tokyo Revengers or the late episodes of Kimetsu no Yaiba, but are just all around solid and don't have any serious flaws. So because of that, I'm willing to give those double pluses as well. Long-running shonen anime or sports anime that aren't fillerized can end up at double plus, something like the new Bleach arc, which is much better than I expected. It's amazing how good Bleach can be when it's not fillerized. Then you have some of the sports anime like Haikyuu, Eyeshield 21, things that may start out slow, but after a while are just consistently really good and may even have some really great moments sprinkled in. Finally, we have the guilty pleasures. Something I watched recently, Love After World Domination, or Koi wa Sekai Seifuku no Atode. This show, I feel bad about recommending it to anyone else because I'm sure most people aren't going to like this as much as I do, and I can't point to any objectively great merit. It just hits the right spot within me, and because of that, I can't lie to myself. I'm going to give it a double plus, but I'm going to recommend it with some caution. Now let's move on to the triple plus level. How do you get the best grade I can possibly hand out? There's really only one way to get there, and that is through sustained excellence. What you need is that first classification of anime that gets a double plus, which is anime that has a great stretch of episodes, and you sustain that throughout basically the entire show. A recent example of this would be Summertime Render, which was great from start to finish. It wasn't perfect, but it doesn't have to be. It just has to continuously impress me throughout its entire run. I gave the triple plus to Kaguya-sama Season 3, but this brings up an interesting point. How do I grade multiple seasons? What if Kaguya-sama Season 3 could only be triple plus good because of all the setup that came before it? Now, in isolation, I gave Kaguya-sama Seasons 1 and 2 double pluses each, and I said maybe if Kaguya-sama Season 3 ends perfectly, I would go back and retroactively change those grades and revise them upward to triple plus. And that's actually exactly what I did. In the case of Kaguya-sama, I thought rating everything holistically, all seasons together, made more sense than rating each season individually. Now we can contrast this to Mob Psycho 100, which I thought each individual season, or at least seasons 1 and 2 so far, I'm still watching season 3, but seasons 1 and 2 in isolation each deserve that triple plus. That wraps up the plus side, but how do we get to the minus side, the negative side, the tilde side? There are actually a lot of ways to get here, especially to the single tilde grade. Anime that are boring but just not flat out bad, maybe they're mediocre, kind of disappointing, not something I actively dislike. There might still be some clear objective merit to it, maybe I could easily envision other people liking it and just don't see it being for me. Maybe there's just one factor that turned me off. Once again, there are a lot of ways to get here, and I'm going to go through a whole bunch of examples. Kanokari, Rental Girlfriend. This is a show that might have been good had the main character not been such a simpering bitch. Season 1 had some legitimately good episodes. Even in Season 2, I still like some of the girls, I like some of the setup in the world around the main character. The main character himself just ruins everything to the point that I cannot give this a positive grade anymore. The Shield Hero, Season 2. This is a show in which the first season felt like it told a complete story, and everything after that in Season 2, there are directions it could have taken that might have been satisfying, but Season 2 for the most part just felt like a filler arc, something that was kind of unnecessary and pointless. So because it didn't satisfy any craving that I had, it didn't go where I wanted it to, I gave it a single tilde. Uzaki-chan Wants to Hang Out. This is the kind of show that does, well, some things right, if you know what I mean. It has a lot of sexual tension, I find some aspects of it relatable, but you get that quintessential problem with comedies. If the jokes don't land, I can't give it a good grade, and a lot of the jokes here just don't land, so single tilde. Going back a long time, there was an anime called Strike Witches. I would say this is the opposite of a guilty pleasure. Something that I would find perhaps unreasonably or unfairly turns me off, and so I can't give it a good grade even though I could see other people easily liking it. Something where if these underage girls just put some pants on, there might have been something I could like about it, but I just can't get past that. And I know a lot of anime bloggers are into that shit, so good for them. Single plus for them maybe, but tilde for me. Same thing for BL or yaoi-centric shows. No moral judgment here, it's just not what I'm into. You could probably do the same thing with lesbians and I'd be on board, but if I saw one of these gay shows, I would probably have to give it a single tilde because it does not appeal to me, even though I could imagine it appealing to a lot of other people. If an anime is flat out porn or hentai, then it's probably going to get a single tilde at best, because if there's no real story behind it, I would just rather watch real porn, even if the animated character designs are relevant to my interests. As you can see, there are a lot of ways to get to the single tilde. Really, the only unifying theme is that if I hopped in my time machine and went back to my previous self, I would advise myself not to watch these anime in the first place, even though perhaps I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt in some ways or willing to make some excuses for them. But that's no longer the case once we get to the double tilde. These are anime that I think are just flat out bad and that I actively dislike, although I can still see some objective merit to them. Dragon Ball Super is the last anime I gave a double tilde to, and that ended quite a few years ago, so as you can see, these grades are really not very common. Problems with Dragon Ball Super, alright, it was just overall really low effort and mailed in. There were, however, some occasional good fights. There was one arc, that Future Trunks arc, that didn't feel completely half-assed. It felt like they at least put some effort into it, but otherwise, it just felt really fucking lazy. Going even farther back in time, to my least favorite anime that I've seen a full season of, K-On! Even that anime that I constantly bash, I can still see some redeeming merit to it. There was one episode, only one episode, but still one episode that I actually liked. I'll also say there was some good music, not all of it, but some of it was good. And because it was done by Kyoto Animation, I have to assume that there is some redeeming merit to the animation quality, even though it didn't appeal to me. So even my least favorite TV anime of all time, one that I bash constantly as an example of terrible anime, even that qualified for double tilde. So how bad do you actually have to be to sink down to the triple tilde level? Well, this is anime that I consider to be absolute garbage. Anime that is not just bad, but offensively bad. Anime that has no redeeming merit whatsoever, and I can't imagine anyone else possibly liking. That's how bad you have to be. And you're not going to find this in TV anime, because I assume that TV anime has at least some quality control, but you're much more likely to find this in one-shot OVAs and specials. Now, I've only given this out to 4 anime ever, so let's just go right through them. Full Moon Osagashite, Kawaii Kawaii Dai Boken. Now, I actually like the original Full Moon Osagashite anime. I gave it a double plus, and it was even a candidate for being triple plus. That's how good it was. But this special is just some stupid little side story about the girl being late for something, so she runs around and she gets obstructed everywhere she goes. It's just really fucking stupid. And they even have one scene where they just cut out the animation entirely and have like a live action shot of something. So fucking dumb. The next thing I gave a triple tilde to was Jiku Boken Numa Monja, whatever it's called. It is basically a Chrono Trigger OVA. Chrono Trigger being one of my favorite video games of all time, if not my all-time favorite video game. But this anime, oh my god, it's just one of these little side monsters screwing around at the Millennial Fair. When I talk about offensively bad anime, I'm talking about things like this. You take something I really like Full Mono Sagashite or Chrono Trigger, and you smear shit all over it. That's how you go from being just regular bad to offensively bad. Third one I gave it to, let's see, Naruto Dai Katsugeki Yukihime Shinobu Hojo Datebayo Konoha no Sato no Dai Undo Kai. Fuck these names. But this is basically all of the Naruto characters participating in some sort of sports festival, and Naruto himself, he just has to take a shit the whole time, so he's running around this whole festival trying to find a place to take a shit. Yeah, you can imagine just how good that is. Basically anything with Datebayo in the title is going to be pure garbage. Finally, the last one I gave a triple tilde to was Nyoron Churiya-san. And I'm not even that big of a fan of Haruhi in the first place, but this was just a terrible example of corporate takeover of fan-made memes. The Nyoron Churiya meme, it was something that fans were into. I never really got what it was all about, but then the industry was like, hey, let's try to take over this meme, make a whole anime about it, and the fans will eat this shit up because they were eating up everything that you put the fucking Haruhi label onto back then. Well, this was just terrible. I only lasted through one episode. I'm like, nah, I can't imagine anyone possibly liking this, even the most hardcore of Haruhi fans. So I gave it the triple tilde. And that is my rating scheme. If you're interested, you may want to go back to my post from 2012 where I made this flowchart and explained it back then with examples that were relevant at the time. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll try to get to you. And next time we'll talk about this will probably be in another 10 years.